Hello out there today. Welcome to our podcast. This is Coach EJ, the brand.
And this is Coach Aaron, the source. Don't forget to hit that like button, send us a comment. And today, EJ, what do we got on tap?
Yeah, I want to talk about this subject, Aaron, about your mentality during competition when things are going awry or, you're like not having a great day. How do you handle it mentally to get back on track, get focused on what you're trying to do? And some of my initial thoughts are, Aaron, is that a lot of athletes, young athletes, have trouble taking, I'm going to say, adjustments or failures during the game and turning the page and saying, it's all right, let me move forward. I can do this. I want to talk about that mental piece because it seems like athletes have trouble working or dealing with this in competition. That's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's a good subject. I know we do a lot of our podcasts about the physical, but we also do a lot about the mental. I mean, the fix me mentality, managing your weakness, are just a couple that the podcasts we've done in the past that remind me of that. We just did one on discipline, handling your emotions. And I think this is a really good one. And I think it's something that the parents should definitely participate in. And the reason why I say that is, if you're going to be successful as an athlete, you have to develop a short memory.
Short term, right?
Yep, you have to. You have to learn to forget your failures, learn from them, and then move on. And I think we tend as athletes sometimes to overanalyze what we're doing and to get in our heads too much and to sometimes let things go. You got to learn to let a bad rep go. You got to learn to let a bad race go. You got to learn to let a bad play go. And if you don't, you get into this whole death spiral of doubt, second guessing, which changes your mechanics, which changes your tactics, which changes your technique. And it just kind of ends up being, what is it called? Self-fulfilling prophecy,
right?
Spiraling into failure. So, my most successful athletes have been those that are just able to, they just brush it off their shoulder, water off a duck's back. And I think that's a great trait to have. Some athletes have it innately, but I think it's something that can be developed in our young athletes just by counseling from coaches and parents. And because some of that pressure comes from the coaches and parents.
Right.
And I think that's what happens in a lot of these instances. So it's definitely a plus to be able to be critical of yourself and analyze what you're doing, but you don't want to be overly critical. And I think having a short-term memory helps a lot in you moving forward.
I like that. Aaron, it's kind of funny. I think of this, and I think when we get into training and developing athletes as we do and trying to help them with their skills, I think the one part that they have trouble with is the mental side of the game. And I think what, maybe you and I did, and we're trying to give some recipes for these athletes out there, is I think, reading books is good. And it gives you a different way to kind of figure out what your routine is. There's a great book by two baseball kind of player development people. One, his name is Carl Keel and Harvey Dorfman. These guys kind of figured out that, baseball was a game of failure, and that if you failed 7 out of 10 times and you were good 30% of the time as a hitter, you were pretty much a Hall of Famer. And they started to simplify what they wanted their organization to do. Guys, this is how we want you to handle at bats. This is how we want you to handle pitches. This is how I want you to handle defensive. This is how we want you to, when competition, when you're not in your go zone or you're not involved, we want you to think this way. We want to teach you how to take a timeout, a break, in between your at bats or when you're on the bench, how to go about, letting it go and relaxing and coming back to center when you need to. And I think a lot of athletes don't understand that, how to do that. And I always tell athletes, hey, find books that can help you in what you do. And it necessarily doesn't have to be in that subject or sport that you're in, but find something that you can have like a go-to when you get awry mentally or when you're starting to have some trouble, that you can actually relax and let it flow. And I always like to use this term I have with athletes when I'm teaching them hitting or I'm teaching them how to play defense. And I learned this a long time ago, and I came up with something. D is decision, C is clearing, decision, clear, breathe, and attack. And so whenever there was, a time after a pitch, I put them in that routine. DCBA, decision, clear, breathe, attack. So whenever they kind of took a bad swing at a pitch, they could get out of the batter's box, make their adjustment, clear their mind, breathe, step back in, and attack. And if I could keep them centered like that, then they wouldn't worry so much about their mechanics or wouldn't worry that they made a bad swing, but allowed them to be in a place where they could just like turn the switch on. And I use athletes a lot of times, whether it's Kobe Bryant, I use that, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, all these great athletes, they have this coping mechanism with failure. And athletes out there have a coping mechanism that you can go to that allows you to do that. So I think reading books, trying to understand more about how they work and how the mental game affects them. Those are things I think, I'm thinking of, Aaron, when I think of subjects like this about their mentality and competition. Because you and I know, Aaron, competition is a test of what you do in practice and how you deal with stuff.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And from the performance side, I would say, just like you did, a mantra might be let it go. Or let it go and let it flow. Because from a performance side, performance comes out with relaxation. And you can't relax if you're holding on to something. So you've got to learn to let it go, to let it flow. And
I like that.
In track and field, sometimes athletes will say, even if we're just practicing block starts, they'll say, oh man, that wasn't a good start. It's like, it's all right. We're doing 10 of them. Right. Let's work on the next 8 or the next 7. And you have to just understand that making mistakes, not getting everything perfect is just part of the process. And, being able to let it go is not something you're just going to say, I'm going to do it on game day.
Right.
You do it daily through your practicing. If you're having thoughtful practice, you're going to know when you messed up, and you're going to think about that, and you're going to figure out your correction, and you're going to move on.
Right.
If you approach your practicing and your training that way, then it's easy to do that when you're in a game, because you already are or putting into play the process like what you described with athletes. You're already putting into play like what I would do with some athletes, where I just say, turn your back on the blocks, close your eyes, and breathe.
Wow. Great. Great.
It's everyone could have their own different way of resetting, but you should practice resetting. One of the things I do with my boxers, with my fighters, I when they get to the corner, say, or when we're doing something, it's a lot of activity and you're breathing real hard and your mind's racing, I'll say, okay, you got 30 seconds to bring it down. And what that is their cue to start working on some of the breathing we talked about, clearing their mind, seeing things, you know what I'm saying, slowing the game down.
Right.
So it could be any type of coping mechanism you want, but institute that into your training so that it becomes an automatic response when you are out on the field or on the court. And I learned that from a book years ago, as a thing called Mind Body Training or something like that. And it was kind of like a Eastern philosophy Zen thing where it talked about breathing exercises, but through practicing those, basically, as soon as you do that sequence, those are actually triggers for your body's physiological response. So I would do those triggers and my body would automatically relax.
Gotcha.
But you have to practice doing that for it to happen. You just can't say, okay, I'm gonna relax. You know, there's 3 guys on base and, you know, it's a 3-2 count. You already gotta have that process in place.
Right. Yes.
For your body to actually do that. You just can't say, well, I'm gonna tell my body to relax. It doesn't happen that way. You know? Guys learn to relax by practicing how to relax.
Right. It's funny. I like that you said the word reset, because I think that's a word that's not really used in sports enough. Is reset, refocus, get back to your center, whether that's breathing, whether it's a mantra you say to yourself, whether it's, you know, taking a deep breath, all that has to do with getting yourself mentally back in a high state of trying to achieve what you're doing by doing this. And you need to do this. And the reason why you need to is because you're going to be in this downward spiral if you don't find a way to handle the mentality of stuff when stuff starts to really break down on you in the game. Right. And that's the key. I think adjusting as an athlete during competition happens more than athletes know, Aaron, because there are days where you don't need to adjust. You're just right on. You got it. You got it perfectly. You're ready to go. But how many days are there? I mean, how many days did you have that at the track and field meet, or I had it at a baseball game where it was just like I was breathing and it was happening that day. But a majority of the time I was playing, you know, I wasn't always at my best. You know, I wasn't, but mentally I was always at my best. Mentally, I was always at my best, not physically. And I think that's a lot of times athletes always equate, I'm physically there. What's wrong with me? Nothing. You mentally have to, like you said, practice to put it in play. So when you get in competition, it just flows. I like the way you said that. Let it flow. Let it go.
Let it go. Let it flow.
Let it go. Let it flow.
Yeah, parents, you've got these young athletes and you see them struggling with an activity. It's a perfect opportunity for you guys to figure out, hey, what can we do to help you relax? What can we do to get rid of that anxiety or that anger or whatever emotional response they start having to, you know, frustration that takes them out of their game? So talk it over with your kid, figure it out. Maybe baseball is real superstitious. Maybe you tap the bat on your foot 3 times and then exhale.
Right.
You know, like I said, in track and field, I tell my kids to turn around, don't look down the track. Close your eyes, breathe, turn back around and see the track new again. You know? So it could be whatever works. It doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to have, you know, voodoo beads or whatever else. Just figure out, hey, what centers me? What will reset me? Where's my reset button? I mean, if it's that resets me, you know, I'm pushing the button in my head, whatever, doesn't matter. But start to focus on those cues that trigger the proper emotional response so that you can now perform.
Well said, Aaron. Well said today. And with that note, I'm pushing that button saying, hey, we're out of here. This is Coach EJ, the brand.
And this is Coach Aaron, the source. We'll see you.